Yeah, hi. Welcome back in another session of 11th Business Studies. We have already discussed the nature and purpose of business. Then we had a session on the different forms of business organization. Now, as you can see, this chapter is going to talk about the three forms of enterprises, that is the private sector, public sector, and the global enterprises. So let's have a detailed discussion on these three main forms of organizations. So starting with the first part, that is private enterprises, or we can call it as private sector. So when we talk about private sector, it says that these are the enterprises which are owned by private individuals. They have a private ownership. What do you mean by that? That means in this sector, the enterprises are called private because they are fully owned and managed by private individuals. They have no connection or they have no interference in the management from the state government or the central government. Few of the examples of private sector enterprises I have already listed in this sheet. Like, we can talk about the ADAG group, that is Anil Dhirubhai Ambani group, which has the different forms of private companies. Like we have Reliance Capital, like we have Reliance Communication, Infra, Reliance Group, Reliance Industries, Reliance Industrial Infrastructure, Reliance Retail. In the same pattern, we have the Tata Group as well. So Tata has the AIG Life Insurance Company. They have Tata Capital, they have Tata Motors, Tata Communication, Tata Consultancy, Tata Power, and Tata Steel. So these are some of the companies which are famously known in the private sector. And we have n number of such companies and enterprises operating in the country. Let's move further. What are the features of private sector? So to understand the features of private sector, I have listed down few of the major points which create the differentiation between a private sector and a public sector enterprise. Here, they say they have a solo motto of earning profit. Yes, the private sectors are only focused on earning profit. For them, the survival, their oxygen is nothing but the profit. So, whatever they do, any activity, any kind of transaction, they are only and only looking for earning maximum profits. Point number two says that they have private ownership. As the name suggests, private sector, that means they are owned and governed by the private individuals. And if they're the listed companies, like they are public limited companies, I'm repeating, public limited companies and public sector. These two are very different. So if a private sector enterprise can be a private limited company or it can be a public limited company as well. So if they are a public limited company, they are going to take money from the public. They're also the public, the private individuals in the public can directly invest into those companies. But again, as we discussed, they have no connection with the government. Point number three says the profit is the evidence of success. Yes, of course, the all the big brands in the country or across the globe are known only and only due to their profit earning capacities. So if we talk about Google, we talk about Microsoft, we talk about Apple or Samsung or Reliance, we have these names into our tongues because these companies have already proven that they are into a success. They are a successful enterprise and they are earning huge profits. So any private individual, any private enterprise is only has its entity in the markets when they are earning decent profits or supernatural profits. Because they're owned and governed by the private individuals, so the management also lies in the hands of the private parties. So they can either hire some private individuals who are experts in managing the company affairs, or they can directly themselves manage the company. So again, as we talk about this point, there is no interference, there is no connection with the government while managing the affairs of the company. Last, they have very less political intervention because they have nothing to do with the government of the country, either state or central government. Yes, they do have to go for the licensing process, they do have to go for the documentation, but they have no connection, no direct connections with the governments. Because if they go with the connections of with the governments, they have to convert themselves into a public sector enterprise. Let's move further. Some of the organizations, private organizations, we have already seen in the previous chapter. It can be in the form of sole proprietorship, it can be in the form of partnership or cooperative societies or joint stock companies. And we have a very detailed lesson on these forms. So I don't think okay, I need to explain these forms again to you people. Moving on to the second type of sector. So the complete economy of any country is majorly divided into two sectors. One is the private sector, another one is the public sector. So private sector, as I talked about, the Reliance, the Tata Group, the Birla Group, the Adani Group, all these groups, all these big corporates who are managing, who are earning huge revenues, they have huge capital, they have huge turnovers, and they have very significant impact in the GDP and the taxes paid to the government. But there are some companies, there are some areas where the government wants to control everything. The government wants to have those areas into their hands, and that area is termed as public sector enterprises. So let's talk about the public sector enterprises. Be very clear, be very sure. When I talk about public sector enterprise, I'm not talking about a public limited company. Whereas, because the public limited company is a private sector enterprise. So many of you might be confused about the public limited company and between the public sector enterprises. So when we talk about public sector enterprises, it is in front of your screens. Public limited companies were the joint stock companies we already discussed in the last chapter. So what are public sector enterprises? So they say any enterprise which is owned or which has a stake of government into the company, or it can be established by the government, is termed as a public sector enterprise. It says the ownership and the management lies in the hands of the state government or the central government. These can be also named as state enterprises, public sector undertakings, or government undertakings. Again, you can see I've not written the name public limited companies. No, public limited companies have no connections at all with these public sector enterprises. So public sector enterprises and public limited companies are very different with each other. So never get confused with the public limited company and public sector enterprises. What are the some examples of public sector enterprises? So I've already listed them down. Here you can see I have Andrew Yule and Co, Balmer Lorry Investments, BEML, Bharat Electricals, Bharat Petroleum Corporations, Container Corporation of India. Then you have Engineers India, Coal India, GAIL India, Hindustan Copper, Hindustan Organic Chemicals. So all these brands, all these companies which are running in the country are actually managed and owned by the government. So now this is something new you need to understand more. So let's move on to the different forms of public sector, because we have already discussed the forms of private sector. So this chapter will be more focusing on the public sector units. We'll be discussing about the different forms, and then we'll move on to the global enterprises. So let's understand how many different forms are there and what are the features and merits and demerits of those different forms of public sector enterprises. If we talk about the public sector enterprises, there are also some of the features which create a clear line between a public sector enterprise and a private sector enterprise. Let's discuss those features here. So the first one says it's state-owned affair. Here, the meaning of state should not be get mixed with the only state government. Rather, we say state here means government. It can be the central government, or it can be the state government, or it can be held jointly by the government. So this says that these kinds of enterprises are exclusively owned by the government. It can be central, state, or jointly. Plus, the government has minimum of 51% of stake in these enterprises. Rest of the part can be diluted to the public as well and to the private individuals as well. State control, as we say, the main ownership lies in the hands of the government. So government does not want to dilute the control in the hands of private parties. That is why the whole control rests in the hands of the government. So let's talk about some of the examples like Ministry of Communication. So Ministry of Communication has been a separate undertaking of the government, and according to that ministry, any government communication company like Doordarshan, like All India Radio, all these mediums are directly controlled by the government. So every affair of the of the company or that enterprise will be finally approved or disapproved by the government. The third feature says that they have a financial freedom. Yes, because they do not depend on any sort of investments from any other private individuals. Plus, they are also not dependent on the revenues of the company because the government is there to pull the money inside the organization. So there is government which has a lot of revenue, and that revenue is again transferred or being pulled into these kind of enterprises. So it doesn't matter that the company is running into profits or running into losses. They have the money from the government always. Plus, they also have the freedom to take money or to dilute the equity and to get the money from the general public in the form of shares or in the form of public deposits as well. The fourth feature is service motive, which clearly differentiates the sector from the private sector. And this is the only point. That is why the government has established some of the public sector enterprises as well. That is service motive. So all these enterprises, all these kinds of organizations run and managed by government, they have a single solo motto that they will be serving the society. Whatever actions they are taking, whatever policies they are framing, whatever goods they are offering, they should benefit the society in equal manner. So if we talk about the postal services, it is equally served in the across the society. If we talk about the railway, so railways is again a backbone of Indian economy, and it serves a main source of transportation for Indians. Rather, they don't look to earn profits. Indian Railways always looks to offer better and better of services. Moving on to the fifth one, that is the public accountability. That is a very good feature of these kinds of enterprises because the private individuals, the private sector is only responsible to their owners, to their management. They're not accountable to the public. But when we talk about the public sector enterprises, so the public sector enterprises are directly into the spotlight of the Indian public. So they have to be accountable in the parliament, in front of the opposition leaders, and they also have to justify their actions as well as to the public. So they are, as compared to private sector individuals, they are more sensible kinds of organizations because they always work in the betterment of the society, and they also know if they are taking any wrong decisions or wrong steps that can lead to their destruction, their criticism coming up from the public as well. Bureaucracy in management, that is a very obvious feature because this company, these kinds of enterprises are majorly owned by the state government or the central government departments, and they have their own employees who are taking care of these kinds of organizations. So because there is a huge chain of a long chain of communication, of formal communication, and there are different departmentalizations, and a lot of approvals and a lot of paperwork has to be done. That is why this is a negative feature of these kinds of enterprises, because in such arrangement the decisions get delayed because you have to follow that formal chain of communication. Last but not the least, harmonious relations. It says because these kinds of enterprises are more into the service mode when they are doing their transactions. That is why they always look for the betterment of their employees, for the betterment of their customers, for the betterment of the society. Even they are not much concerned about their competitors. They always take those steps that will only and only benefit the public. That is why they have a very harmonious relationships with all the segments. I hope you understand this. Let's move further. So now let's discuss the first kind of public sector enterprises, that is the departmental undertakings. Departmental undertakings are those enterprises which are owned by the government, and it is run as a part of the government department. Actually, the government forms this department, and it gives that the control of the department directly into the hands of the ministry. So they have a different ministry to keep a check and to properly run those different departmental undertakings. Like we have railways, like we have defense. So all these different sectors have a separate set of ministry as well. Like railway minister will be monitoring the Indian railways. Defense minister will be managing the affairs of the defense industry. What are the features of these departmental undertakings? First, the formation. The formation, as I said, the formation will be done directly by the government, by the central government, and they have no connection of the state government here. So central government will be taking care of these departmental undertakings, and they'll be forming a separate ministry to take care of that particular departmental undertaking. If we talk about the ownership lies in the hands of the government directly. There is no state affair, no state interference in the ownership. Rather, these kinds of departmental undertakings have direct connection with the central government or the union government. Management. So the management is managed by the direct government employees appointed by the government. So the ministry appoints a board or elects a committee that will be managing the whole departmental undertaking. Like the secretary of that ministry will be the chief executive officer of that departmental undertaking. Financing is very easy here because the government has the direct control, direct powers of this kind of departmental undertakings, and the government is going to approve all the budgets, approve all the money. So these kinds of enterprises has not to go to the public, to the public or to the private parties to get the revenues or the money. Appointments are directly done by the government by their separate board, that is Union Public Service Commission, or the Service Selection Board, that is UPSC or SSB. So they conduct the examination process and the appointment process, and these are the bodies, the separate individual bodies that will be hiring the people who will be working for these kinds of departmental undertakings, and those employees will be directly under the payroll management of the central government. Another thing is that these kinds of departmental undertakings do not have any separate existence with the government. That means they cannot own any kind of property. So Indian Railways cannot own any property. Rather, the government of India will be buying and doing all the transactions in the realm of Indian Railways. So Indian Railways is directly a part of the government. So whatever the Indian Railways is doing, any good thing or any bad thing, the government will be directly questioned on that thing. It means these departmental undertakings are directly a part of the government. Last, they have administrative autonomy. As they have been appointed, they have been given a separate minister to take care of the affairs of the company, affair of the enterprises. So they have that autonomy to operate, and according to the ministers, according to that committee, the whole management runs. Let's talk about some of the merits of these departmental undertakings. So talking about the merits, first, it can be very easily formed by the government. As I said, the government just need to have a different minister, a different sector, and the government will be directly appointing that minister to take care of the affairs. Second, because it's directly under the government, central government, and everything is going to approved by the government. That is why they have 100% control. That makes it to effective control by the government. Increase in the government income because these kinds of undertakings do not have their own bank accounts. Whatever they are earning, whatever the revenues are coming up, they are directly deposited in the treasury of the government. So that means the direct incomes of these undertakings are the direct incomes of the government as well. And due to this, the government decreases the tax burden on the public, because if the government is getting the money from these kinds of enterprises, it means the government is able to generate the revenue by these forms of organizations, and that is why to run the government they do not need money from the public, and hence it results in reducing the tax burden. Easy financing, yes, because they are directly under the control of the government. They are a part of the government, central government as well. So they have been allocated a separate budget. Every year, the government is going to pass a budget for these enterprises. That is why they are very easy to finance, to get the money from the government. Last, because the funds are being monitored by the government directly, and the government has to answer in the parliament also. That is why every fund, every penny spent here has to be properly utilized. That is why all the projects, all the upcoming deals, all the upcoming decisions, all the ongoing decisions, ongoing work has to be monitored directly by the government officials. So they make sure that the money is properly utilized. So don't they have any kind of limitations? No, this is not the reality. So let's have a reality check talking about the demerits of these companies or these organizations. Lack of prompt action. The biggest lag is the decision delay for any kind of organization. If the company is not able to take the right decisions at the right point of time, they loses the opportunities, and at times it results in the shutdown of the organization. And this is the biggest challenge for a departmental undertaking, because there is minister a huge chain of formal communication, different bureaucrats at different levels. So for any kind of decision they have to wait, and it gets delayed. Lack of flexibility, because everything is managed by the central government, and central government has n number of affairs to manage. That is why to change the structure, to make a change in the organization is like to move a mountain kind of thing. So these undertakings do not have that facility of flexibility. They cannot change the structure, even it is resulting in the losses or unnecessary utilization of funds. Lack of incentive is another reason. That is why in India, departmental undertakings are not doing good, because the employees has been selected by the central government and being paid by the central government, so they have nothing to do with the revenues of the organization. It means the company is into profits or losses. It doesn't matters to the employees, and because it doesn't matters to the management and the employees, they are not concerned about the profit earning capacity of the organization. Lack of competitive feelings also comes from the same point, because from the top level management till the last chain of employee, they all are getting their salaries from from the central government. That means there is no change if the company, if the organization is going into profits or if it is running into losses. And because when these kinds of organizations are not concerned about the profits or losses, they don't have that competitive feelings. They can be private parties, they can be private enterprises who will be overtaking these enterprises, but still these departmental undertakings have nothing to do with the competition. Due to all of this, what happens when the departmental undertaking starts going into deficits? The government bridges that gap by increasing the tax burden on the general public, because the government has to run that particular departmental undertaking, and to run them they need money, and from where the money has to be come in, that is the general public. So decrease in burden was just a myth. We have seen since ages that these departmental undertakings are running into deficits, huge deficits, and that is resulting in either the burden on the public or increasing the costs of the departmental undertakings. Because these enterprises are directly governed and managed by the central government, so they have a direct and very deep political interference. If the central government is managing it and suddenly the government changes, the whole organization suffers. So if there was an X party which was into power managing that departmental undertaking, they might have taken some of the projects, they might have done some of the future plannings, and suddenly the government changes, the whole project goes into trash. This is one of the huge reasons. That is why the departmental undertakings are not doing good in the country. Last, the red tapeism. As we discussed about the lack of prompt action, it is the result of lack of prompt action that they are seeing the red tapeism as well. Because every file has to be get approved by the senior individuals in the organizations, by the different bureaucrats, by the different collectors, or the different parties in the government. And because they lack that enthusiasm to work, they lack that energy to complete the work, because they are getting the salaries on time, they have nothing to do with the kind of the affairs of the organization, because they are very safe in terms of salary, in terms of remuneration. That results in piling up of the files, and the files and the work gets delayed and delayed and delayed. So these were some of the limitations, a kind of reality check on the departmental undertakings. Let's talk about, if these are the limitations, then why are these undertakings still existing in the country? That means the utility of the departmental undertakings. So when we talk about the utility, that means in which areas these departmental undertakings are must. So first, when the government needs complete control, like, and that thing is very essential for the public welfare, like Indian Railways, like Ministry of Communication. So all these areas where the government needs 100% control in that particular sector or kind of monopoly, the government opens up a departmental undertaking. Secondly, where the government needs 100% secrecies to come in, then also the government will open up the departmental undertaking like the defense, because the defense has a direct connection with the security of the country, and the government does not want to dilute that into the part of the private individuals. That is why the defense industry is still operating as a departmental undertaking. Where the services of public utility are to be made available, and the contribution of the private sector is nil. The government wants that the public welfare, this activity is to be done by the government, and it is a public welfare activity, and no private individual is going to come into that sector and invest. There also, the government comes in with a departmental undertaking. And last but not the least, where heavy investment is involved, where a huge amount of investment is involved, and still there is no guarantee of profits, the government will open up a departmental undertaking. Like we have the example of Indian Railways, there is huge amount of investments going into the Indian Railways, but there is no guarantee of profits. The organization is still running into deficits, but still the government of India is running that department since 70 years, or we can say before independence as well. So this was all about the departmental undertaking. Let's talk about the second type of public sector enterprises. Moving on to the second type of public sector enterprises, those are statutory public statutory corporations or public corporations. So what is the difference between them with the departmental undertakings? That is, these enterprises are created by a special act of the parliament or state legislature. It means they come into existence by passing of a law. So they have a different act. According to that, they have to operate. There are some of the features of public corporations which create a different line of difference distinction between departmental undertakings as well. First thing, the formation. Departmental undertakings were formed by creating a different ministry, generally by the central government. But these kinds of corporations are being formed by passing a special act. It can be by the government, state government, or it can be by the central government as well. Ownership lies in the hands of the government. Again, as in the departmental undertakings, here also the government has a major stake in the ownership, but still some of the ownership can be diluted to public as well. Management, if we talk about the management of these kind of organizations, so they have a professional management because the government appoints the board of directors, a committee, and these committee also appoint some professional managers as well to manage the affairs of the corporation. Financing is again very free. It comes from the government, but they're free to move to the public also to get the money, as well as these kinds of corporations are free to go for the loans as well. Appointments. Here, the appointments are not done by the government, rather by a separate board of the corporation. So the corporation is free to appoint their employees, and the employees will be the employees of the corporation, not of the government. Separate legal entity that makes a huge difference of public corporations with the departmental undertakings. As we discussed that those kinds of organizations do not have the facility of separate legal entity, but here these kinds of organizations have a separate legal entity. It means they can own their properties, they can take decisions, they can have their bank accounts, they can have the income and revenues directly into their accounts coming up. Administrative autonomy is also possible because these kinds of corporations have a separate board, a separate set of employees who are not liable to the government. So as compared to departmental undertakings, because there is less of bureaucracy involved here, less of government involved here. These kinds of corporations enjoy more autonomy. Let's discuss the merits and demerits of these organizations. The the biggest merits is the autonomy of operations, because there is no minister, there is no ministry to take care of these kinds of corporations. They are free, they are small as compared to departmental undertakings, so they are free to take the decisions and to operate accordingly. And due to this autonomy in operations, it is very easy to take quick decisions. So that becomes the second merit. That means these kinds of organizations do not have to ask everything from the government to do or to implement. That is why they are more quick in taking the decisions. Efficient management, because the board is free to appoint the professional managers, the professional employees, as well as the board of directors. That is why the whole set of employees are picked up by the finest directors or the managers inside the organization, and that is why those set of employees create a efficient management. Social service motive. Here also the organizations have a service motive, but they also have a profit motive. That means they have to do the social service, but in the lights of profits as well. So they are more concerned for profit also, not like the departmental undertakings. And protection of public interests, it means again, they cannot override their profit motive in order to override the service motive. They have to again work in the interest of the public, for the welfare of the public and the society. But yes, they also have a profit earning factor with them. Talking about the limitations, many of the limitations are similar to the departmental undertakings. That is, the operational autonomy is only on papers. The government has a very direct control in these kinds of organizations as well, and that again brings down them as like departmental undertakings. They have huge challenges because they cannot take decisions directly without asking from the government officials. Lack of competitive feelings. Again, although the board appoints them, and although the board has to pay the salaries of the employees, but as compared to private sector companies, these corporations are not into the competitive markets. They are more into the public service. And because the government is pulling up the money, again, the management is getting the money on time. Their salaries are coming on time, so they lack the competitive feelings. Last, ignoring service motive. At times, the management also focuses on more of profits, less of service. So, in order to earn more profits, the management can overrun the service motto of the company, of the corporation. So, that is again a limitation or a demerit of these kinds of public corporations. So where these public corporations are suitable. So first, where again the huge capital is involved and no private sector is coming up. And second, where the public welfare is on top priority. Like we have seen in the bankings, like SBI, we have seen like now the SBI is a public company, sorry, a government company, but earlier it was established as a public corporation. So there are a number of organizations which are still running in the country as public corporations. Moving on to the third type of organizations, that is a government company. Let's go through them also. Let's move on to the third type of public sector enterprises, that is a government company. So if we talk about a government company, it's a company or enterprises which has been set up according to the Indian Companies Act 1956/2013. And again, here the minimum 51% of the stake or the shares lies in the hands of the government. It can be the state government, it can be the central government, or it can be both of the governments joining together hands to own that government company. But yes, the remaining part of the shares can be diluted to the public and to the private individuals. There can be two types of government companies. First, whole completely owned by the government, where the government has entire capital in coming up from their sources, and the government has 100% shares in the company. And second, the mixed owned government companies, where some shares can be in the hands of the state government, some shares can be in the hands of the central government, and some part of the capital can become pulled up from the public as well. Talking about the features of government companies, how they are different from the other two. First, their formation is done by the Companies Act, not by any act in the parliament or not by any department formation. The ownership can be in three different forms. First, completely owned by the government. Second, some of the part of the shares can be owned by the central government or the state government. And third, the mixed ownership, where the public can also join hands with the government and invest money into the company. The management here, the management is again comes up by appointing a board of directors, but the board of directors are appointed from the government because the government has the largest share. But yes, the government, if government wants, they can have private directors, private parties as directors as well. The financing can be done from the government sources as well as from the public because they can dilute the shares into the stock markets. Appointments, as we discussed in the public corporations, are done by the companies. These government companies have their own set of recruitment process, and the employees are the employees of the government company, not of the government. So they are not treated like the government company, government employees. They are rather the direct employees of that government company. Yes, sixth, the separate legal entity feature. That means these companies have a separate legal entity. They are artificial person because they are registered as a company in the Companies Act. So they can own properties, they can do transactions into their names, they have bank accounts, and they can be sued in the court of law if they are found guilty for any kind of activities. And administrative autonomy, because the government companies are again managed by the board of directors and the employees are not answerable to the government but to the company. So the company has more administrative autonomy. That means they are free to operate, they are free to take decisions while doing the transactions and while doing the business. So these are the features of government companies. Some examples can be the State Trading Company, Coal India, State Bank of India. All these organizations, Hindustan Aeronautics. So all these kinds of companies are government companies. Let's talk about the merits and demerits of these organizations as well. Talking about the merits of the government companies, many of the merits are very similar to the other public sector enterprises. First, they're very easy to form because they just need to get registration according to the Companies Act 1956 2013. And for them, the government can also relax some of the provisions of the act because it's a government company. Autonomy in operations, that is the biggest merit of a government company because they are a separate legal entity. They are free to perform, they are free to operate, so there is no intervention of the government directly inside the company. Flexibility is also a very good feature of these kinds of organizations. This has not been enjoyed by the departmental undertaking and by the public corporations. Whereas a government company is free to change the structure to take the major changes, which makes it more flexible. Quick decisions. Yes, these companies are very free to perform, to operate, and that is why. And they have their directors sitting inside the company. So the employees and the management has direct access to the board of directors, which makes it very easy to take the decisions. Easy financing, because these organizations enjoy the finance from the government and they can also go to the public. That is why they can have finance from two different sources, which has not been enjoyed by the departmental undertaking as well as the public corporations. Benefits of private participation can also be there, and that can result in many merits or many advantages to the company because we can dilute that 49% of the shares to the private parties, to the public as well. And from there, we can have professional coming up into the company and managing the affairs of the company, taking the companies to different heights. But yes, there are some of the demerits also, like again, there is autonomy, but that is more on papers. Again, the intervention of government is always there. The policies, the regulations are always there. The government is very strict to those companies because the government wants that service motto. So at times the company has to sacrifice, to compromise on their profit parts. No continuity in policies because the management is again owned by the government. If the government changes, the management changes, the board of directors, all the policies going on, all the future plans running up, they can be shut down in a day, and then again the company has to again change the whole structure, the whole process. Lack of professional efficiency because the government is not stable. The government changes the board of directors, can change the board of directors at any point of time. That also becomes a curse for the government companies, and because these kinds of employees, again, they are more concerned for their salaries, for their revenues. They are not more concerned about the revenues of the government companies. That is why that level of participation, that level of the degree of profit earning capacity lacks huge here also as compared to private sector enterprises. Last, they have a fear of public accountability because the government companies are again owned by the government, so government has to answer to the public in the parliament houses if this company is going into any losses or the company is not running properly. Then also the company has to be responsible, has to give the answers to the public as well. If we talk about the suitability of these government companies or the utility of the government companies, we can say where the private partnership is also needed. There, in those areas, we can start up with the government companies where the activities related to finance are to be encouraged, so that the formation of the like the formation of the state trading corporation. The areas where the government wants to have the private participation and the government has an intention to do that service or the welfare work, there also they can come up with the government companies. Thirdly, where the interest of the various parties is in danger, as was the case in the government purchased most of the shares of the Swadeshi cotton mills. At times, a very good company operating under the private sector area, and it is doing very good, and it has a very huge employee base. They're also and the company is running into losses. So, in order to save that type of organization, the government can come in and can take and buy the shares of that company, like it was there in the case of Swadeshi cotton mill. So, the government doesn't wanted to unemploy that huge lot of employees because the company was going to shut down. The government came in as a rescuer, and the government rescued the company by buying the shares. Last, when the government desires to transfer a new undertaking to private sector after its establishment. So when the government wants, okay, over the period of time, will exit from here and will again dilute the control into the hands of private sectors. So they will never go into the departmental undertaking or the public corporation. They will rather establish a government company. In the past 30 minutes, whatever we have discussed is written over here in the form of differentiation. Let's again go through the differentiation of departmental undertaking, public corporation, and the government company as well. So as we all know, the departmental undertaking is formed by the ministry, whereas public corporation is formed by passing an act, and the government company will be established by registering into Companies Act. If we talk about the legal status, the first one, that is the departmental undertaking, do not have the privilege of being a separate legal entity, whereas public corporation and government companies, they have a separate legal entity. Finance, completely departmental undertaking, 100% financed by the central government. For every actions, they have budgetary allocations as well. Whereas public corporations also get the funds from the government, but they can borrow independently also. They don't have the privilege of getting that budget. Last, the government company, they have the separate financing coming up from the government. They have other shareholders. They can invite public also to invest into the company. Management and controlled. So here in the departmental undertakings, they are completely managed and controlled by the government officials from the concerned industry and the ministry. Whereas public corporation is managed by a board of directors appointed by the government in the parliament. And last, in the government company, they also have a board of directors again nominated by the government, but they can be private individuals also working as the directors. If we talk about the staff, here in the departmental undertaking, the government servants and the civil service code is applicable. UPSC and SSB will going to be hire the employees for the departmental undertaking. For public corporations, we have non-government servants because they will be working as a part of that or corporation. They are not the government employees, but they are the employees of the public corporation. And last, here you can see they are not treated as government service servants, but they are the regular employees of the company of that government company, and the regular code of employment applies over there. Last five, autonomy. So we have seen in departmental undertaking there is almost zero, or we can say nil autonomy while doing the operations because government has 100% control over there. As compared to public corporations have a degree of autonomy, but again they have to go to the government for day-to-day workings. And the last, in the government companies, they have the highest freedom when it comes to the autonomy part. Ownership, the departmental undertakings are completely owned by the government. They are also completely owned by the government, that is public corporations, but the government companies have 51% control in the hands of government. पब्लिक अकाउंटेबिलिटी हाईएस्ट होगी डिपार्टमेंटल में. अकाउंटेबल टू द पार्लियामेंट होते हैं पब्लिक कॉर्पोरेशंस, एंड जो पब्लिक कंपनीज गवर्नमेंट कंपनीज हैं दे आर अकाउंटेबल टू द मिनिस्ट्री कंसर्न, नॉट टू द पार्लियामेंट, नॉट टू द पब्लिक. Flexibility of operations, departmental undertaking has zero flexibility because the whole structure is into the form of department. Public corporation has a considerable flexibility. It means it says that it has a degree of flexibility, but again, it is very difficult to change the major structure. Whereas सबसे ज्यादा जो flexibility हम देख पाते हैं वो एक government company में देख पाते हैं. Suitability. So we have seen defense, postal services, telecom, broadcasting. These are the areas where the government has still the departmental undertaking coming up. Industrial, commercial, and enterprises of national priority, where the government wants to develop that particular sector, huge investments are required. We have seen public corporations taking up the industrial and commercial enterprises like coal, mining, huge projects, construction, public construction affairs. And last, where the industrial commercial enterprises requiring participation from the domestic and the foreign private capital is also required. There we can have these private government companies coming up. I hope you all are clear with these three forms. Let's talk about again the major differences with a private enterprise and a public enterprise. Objective, as we talked about, the main objective of these public sector enterprises is to serve the society, is the welfare of the society rather to earn the profit. So earning profit is a secondary motto of these organizations. Whereas private enterprises have a single motto, just to earn profits as much as they can. They don't have any social responsibility. They don't feel to have that social responsibility, and they don't have any social connect with the public. Also, ownership, here the ownership can be entirely into the hands of government or partly into the hands of government, but in the private ownership, private owned companies, they have zero government control or government ownership. Forms of organization, we have seen there are three major types of public organizations, that is undertakings, departmental undertakings, public corporations, and a government company. And in the private type of organizations, we have sole proprietorship, partnership, joint stock companies as well. Financial resources, they can be here the funds come up from the government treasury, directly from the government departments, and partly at times in case of government companies they can go to the public. Whereas with the private sector, we talk about the private sector, here the money is being directly supplied by the private investors. Evidence of success. The public sector is never measured with the evidence of success, that is the evidence of earning profit. So their success is not measured in terms of profits, but the success is measured in terms of providing the services. So here it is rated in terms of efficiency, it is rated in terms of production, services, cost kitna decrease ho raha hai, how much quality of goods they are providing. Whereas the only success parameter for a private enterprise is rated in terms of earning profit and fulfilling the social responsibility as well. But the major criteria is to earn maximum profits. Talking about the risk, here the owners don't have any risk. Risk is negligible because the government is having everything. But here in the private sectors, the complete oneness of the owner, the complete risk lies in the hands of the owner. Autonomy. So we have seen public sector enterprises don't enjoy much autonomy as compared to the private sector enterprises. Area of operations. So public sector enterprises are generally open up in those fields or those areas which are of more public importance, like health, education, defense, security, transportations at times. But here, the private sectors are opened up where they have the maximum chances of earning profits. Political intervention we have seen in almost every public sector enterprise. There is a degree of political interference, but in the private sector enterprises, there is no political interference at all. And last, the management is again nominated by the government. They have officers coming up from the government officials and they have to work according to the directions of the government. Whereas यहाँ पे जो owners होते हैं, जो private investors होते हैं, they appoint the management board of directors and they have to work according to the shareholders' instructions and regulations. So these were the major differences of a private sector and a public sector enterprises. सो आई गेस यहां तक आपको समझ में आ गया होगा. चलिए आगे बढ़ते हैं और क्या है इस चैप्टर के अंदर जानते हैं. We've seen the major difference between a public sector enterprise and the private sector enterprises. And we have also seen that since our independence, it is private sector which has proven itself as compared to public sector enterprises. So in order to change their role, because only doing the service motive will not lead to these enterprises to any destination. That is why after 1991, the government of India has started taking many major steps in order to change the working culture, the change that their financial structure. In order to revive them, they have taken few of these steps. First of all, in the year 1991, before the year 1991, there were 17, more than 17 enterprises owned by the government, but rather it was again reduced to three. Now only the government has three departmental undertaking into their hands, that is atomic energy, arms, railway, and transport. Reserved industries, sorry. So in these particular industries, no private party can come in, that is atomic, arms, and rail. But in the other areas, the government has privatized it, like hospitality, like hospitals, medical, health, education. There also the private participation is coming up. Second, the government has started referring the professionals. They have changed the IAS officers and they have recruited some professional managers in order to revive the operations, in order to make them into a proper functioning unit. Implementation of memorandum of undertaking, that is MOU concept. Here the government is into a contract with the particular government company or that undertaking, that the government will be giving them 100% autonomy. There will be no political intervention, and the managers have to give them a guarantee that they will be bringing that SIC unit into the profit earning unit again. After that, the government has also started privatizing many of the public enterprises. Like recently, LIC, the shares of LIC were sold by the government, the shares in the BSNL, the shares in the SBI. Many of the public enterprises were converted into private organizations in order to bring those enterprises back into profits. After this, the government has also done a revival program by forming a board of industrial and financial reconstruction. It actually manages those SIC units and try to revive those SIC units, those SIC public sector enterprises, and they try to bring it back into the profits. And last, provision for National Renewal Fund. All those government employees who were scared of these steps, they have been given a job security ad, and they have also given their salary structures has been revised. That means if an employee performs good, the government is going to give him remuneration according to the performance. So these are some of the major steps taken by the government in order to change the role of the public sector enterprises. Moving on to our third category, that is the global enterprises, or we can call them as multinational companies, joint ventures, or public-private partnerships. So these are the three forms in which the global enterprises operate. So it can be in the form of MNC, it can be in the form of joint venture, or it can be in the form of triple P model, that is private-public partnership. So let's discuss about them. Let's start with MNC. MNC is a company which is operating in multiple countries but is registered in a single country, like McDonald's, like KFC, Subway, Coca-Cola, multiple companies which are operating across the globe, but they have a registered office in a single country. So these kinds of organizations are known as multinational corporations. The features are these companies are centrally managed. That means wherever they have the registered head office, headquarter, whatever you can call it, the whole branches in the different countries and the different states and cities are managed from that headquarter. Worldwide spread of business, so they only believe in spreading the business because they want to earn more of profits. That is why they keep on spreading their businesses into those areas where they are not working. Better quality products, as they have to operate into multiple markets, multiple countries, and they have to face a lot of competition from the domestic markets as well as in the international markets. So the goods have to be of top priority quality. So that's why they always believe in providing top quality products, like we have Apple with us. Large size, yes, if a company is operating into multiple countries, they have to be do the operations into large scale. If you talk about Coca-Cola, one of the biggest beverage company in the world, so they have huge units, huge production units established in various countries, and the scale of operation is so big, so huge, we cannot even imagine. Access to international market, it's much obvious. They always go into the international market and they operate like they are operating into the world. That is why their policies, their regulations, their aim is to capture the international markets. Last, they always give very deep attention to their advertisement campaigns because they have to do the advertisement across the globe, across the different countries, with a different set of customers with different cultures and beliefs. So their advertisements have to be very specific according to the country, according to the place wherever they are operating. Advantages: first, due to these companies in that particular country, the foreign investment comes in. So if a foreign company is coming in, it brings the huge foreign investment also, because it will establish the units of production over there. It will start selling there. So it will start giving the taxes to the government and employment also. Second, increase in employment. Definitely, when an MNC will come in, it will set up a whole infrastructure to operate into the country, and that will result in huge employment opportunities. Proper use of resources, because they have to operate globally, so they cannot even spend a single rupee improperly, because their every 1 rupee will multiply into thousands and crores, and that will lead to huge losses. So that is why they even work on each and every aspect to reduce the cost to maximize the profit. Technical development: when a foreign company comes in, it brings the new technologies also inside the country, and usually MNC will come in for those products or for those kinds of technologies which are not available in the domestic market. So whenever a new company comes in, a foreign company comes in, MNC comes in, that also brings a technical development to the economy, to the government, to the country. End of local monopoly: yes, there are some markets where we have domestic monopoly happening around and the customers are cheated, the customers are not given that quality of products. Where, so in those particular areas, that uh, multinational corporation can come in and can break that chain of monopoly and give the customers the right product at the right prices. Managerial development also happens because these companies have huge set of employees, huge set of offices. They are operating into multiple countries. That is why they have to be have the best of managers with them, because they have to do the policy formulation across the countries. So they have a huge managerial backforce, and that is why in whichever country they are entering into, and they are doing the hirings over from there, that particular managers will also get that uh, exposure to work with that world class management. Increase in exports, definitely yes. If the country if into a host country, MNC is operating, and MNC starts operating in other countries as well, it will start producing a lot, and it will result in exporting of a huge quantity of products into the different parts of the world. Disadvantages: danger to the domestic industries, because these companies are giants and like they can come bring in their own set of monopolies, and they can throw out all the domestic players from the markets. We have already seen like Amazon has already broken the retail industry in the India. So this is a huge danger for the domestic industries. Second, repatriation of profits. That means the profits are not directly given to the government, but yes, the profits are divided at multiple levels, which means the benefit of the profits, which is directly given by the domestic player to the government, it is not there. So here, the repatriation of profits, that also means that the profit is going outside of the country from the host country. So from wherever the country is operating, company is operating in that particular country, it will be earning huge profits and taking back the profits into their particular registered country. That means the foreign exchange will get a reverse impact. It will be going outside of the country as compared to coming in. Intervention in the local politics, as we have seen that these companies generally set up their plants, their production units into poor and underdeveloped countries. And over there, because of providing huge employment opportunities, they start to manipulate the government. They start to take over to the government. It's a kind of, we have seen that it's kind of trade colonization, we can say a business kind of colonization starts happening because these giant companies comes into those poor countries and start interfering into the politics as well, which is not good. Fourth, exploitation of natural resources. Yes, because these companies only they are more interested in earning profits. They have nothing to do with the protection of the environment, protection of the interests of the local public. So that is why they carelessly use the resources of that poor country, underdeveloped country. That results in exploitation of natural resources. Last, no benefit for the poor people. In two sense, we can understand this. Firstly, the products developed by these companies is generally for the rich people, like chocolates, like cosmetics, skin products, creams, all those highly priced products, which is of no use to poor people. Secondly, because they are establishing their units into those underdeveloped countries, they also don't pay that level of remuneration which they actually deserve because the country is poor, there's huge population, so they are also ready to work at lower wage scales. So this is all about MNCs. Let's talk about the next form of global enterprises. So I have already taken a list of some of the famous MNCs of India and foreign. You can see we have Ranbaxy, a very huge pharmaceutical company which is famous for making very famous medicines. Then we have Dr. Reddy, Aurobindo Pharma. Talking about Infotech, we have Infosys, Wipro, Cognizant, iFlex. Auto industry, we have Tata Motors, Bharat Forge, Sundaram Fasteners. In the manufacturing field, we have said Sterlite, Hindalco, SL, Asian Paints, Mozabeer, and in the engineering sector, we have ONGC as a MNC, that is multinational corporation. Talking about the next form of global enterprises, that is joint ventures. So if we talk about joint ventures, what are joint ventures? As the name suggests, wherever the two business entities or enterprises agree to join together and to make a new firm, or they can have a single same firm under a different name for a common objective and a mutual gain, it gives rise to a joint venture. Those two joining enterprises can be private individuals or it can be government enterprises also. Making of joint ventures has many benefits. First, it is a very easy ticket to overseas markets because when you enter with a global player, you get access into all those markets where that particular enterprise is already operating. So we have already seen the case of Maruti Suzuki. We have already seen many of the tie-ups in country India. Second, the risk is minimalized because now the two big players is going to invest the capital, the risk is going to share, the profits are going to be shared. And because you are entering into a firm which is already a multinational corporation, or it can be a company which is operating in a different country. So if one firm is lacking in some resources or something like that, the another one is here to back that firm up. Third, the technological benefit is also there. If you tie up, if you go and tie up with a company which is a technological company or a company which has more better technology than you, it definitely gives benefit to you and your to your country also. Like in the case of Maruti Suzuki, Suzuki was the company which was far ahead in the technology. That is why Maruti joined hands with the Suzuki for technology. In the same case of Hero Honda, so Honda was the company which was providing the technology to the Hero Motors. Competitive strength. When you joined hand together with a player which was earlier a competition to you, now it becomes your strength. So the company which might have been worked as a competitor, if you might have not been into the joint venture, now that company is with you, all the resources is with you, the market share is with you. So that competition is converted into your strength. Last, definitely, when the two companies will join hand together, many of the resources can be shared, many of the things can be shared, assets can be allocated. That is why it will result in reduction of huge amount of costs. The third and the last form of global enterprises is private public partnership, that is triple P. So what is that? It is generally a partnership between a public sector enterprise and a private sector enterprise, and they join hand together in order in some of those government projects where the government is aiming for public benefits, but in the form of management coming up from the private enterprises. So the government wants to develop that area, but still the government knows that my company is not expert in doing that, so it will be joining hands together with a private player or a private enterprise. The targets is getting finance, designs, implementation, and providing of infrastructure facilities that were traditionally provided by the public sectors. Some of the successful triple Ps we have in the field of transports, where we have seen roads, railways, bridges, dams building up by the triple P model, and it has been a huge success. In education, we have seen schools, universities, and colleges as triple P project. We have also seen hospitals, water waste management, water treatment plants, distribution channels, where the government has done successful triple P model. The Delhi Metro is the best example of this triple P. Features of triple P are here. It is related to high priority government planned projects where government knows that they are lacking in the technology, they don't have that expertise, so they'll be going with a private known player. Second, PPP's main objective is to combine the skills of private expertise, experience, technologies with the and the high delivery quality services with the government projects. Triple P also allow government to overcome their budgetary and the borrowing constraints, because the Triple P will bring in the investment from the foreign markets as well as and from the public also. Triple P are also used for government projects for the public benefits. So the government will be looking for the benefit motive, but the private player will be looking up to build that thing into a profit earning thing. That is, like we have the Delhi Metro, which is a very good example of triple P model. That is, they are giving the services to the public, but they are also running into profits. Triple Ps are the triple P model also leads into faster implementation of the projects, and also they also guarantee the proper maintenance and the life of the project. It also divides the risks between the public sector and the private sector. The public sector, that is the government, is responsible for pulling up the money, for managing the service motto. So the private sector is not into that fear that if the model fails, they are going to lose a huge amount of capital and revenues. Triple Ps also remain accountable because they are into the government projects, and they have a direct control of government also. So the quality, the cost of the services are also accountable by the government in the parliamentary houses. Government also is actively involved in these projects as they define the life of the projects. They also put responsible these private players for the repairs and the maintenance of these projects. So this is the entire chapter number 3, where we discussed about the public sector, the private sector, and the global enterprises. I hope you understood all these concepts in detail, and you got the main pointers which are required to answer the questions related to this chapter. I would request, please read this chapter once again from your books, and please try to make diagrams, flowcharts, different work on your presentation, because business studies is more about presentation, less about the content. Go through the points again, and if you have any doubts, you can connect with me on my Telegram Business Studies Doubt Clearing channel. Do join it. We have all the links in your platform. We have already given the links of our Telegram doubt clearing channels. So you can join me over there and you can ask your doubts. Let's have another session on chapter number 4 coming up in few days. Take care. Bye bye.